silly is that?
Pulls off three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
Hello, welcome back to the Hoop Junkie podcast, the number one sports podcast in the world.
According to us.
I'm your host, Zach, and I'm joined as always by the one and only play-in ready boss himself, Chance Baker.
What's going on, man?
Man, I'm good, man. I'm pumped. I'm excited. Now we're at that point in the year, Chance, where it'll probably feel like we'll be potting almost every day.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I've basically cleared my social calendar for the next 2 to 3 months just to make sure I'm ready. Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. A lot happened over the past few days. That was, I feel like, one of the craziest endings to an NBA season that I've seen in a while.
Dude, you got NBA doing investigations on teams. You got players fighting each other. Man,
punches being thrown. We've got my guy Kenny Lofton dropping 42 and 14. I saw a stat. There was 30 guys that had their career high on the last game of the season, which is just awesome. That's the game where they're just send all the G League guys, let them score however many they want, let them play 40 minutes, and then we'll reset. And so obviously there are a couple meaningful games, and we'll get to the repercussions of everything that happened yesterday. But yeah, it was some exciting stuff.
Dude, hey, Kenny Lofton looked like the man out there, dude. I sitting there, I wasn't watching that game, because it didn't seem like a game to be watching at that time.
There was other important things going on for sure.
Right. And so I look at my phone and I said, what, this dude have a 40 and 15 game? What? I was
Man,
like, oh my God.
I'll tell you what, it was Easter Sunday. He might have resurrected the Grizzlies season. We had Adams coming out. We were all feeling bad, but Kenny Lofton just rose up and he said, I got you guys. So I'm feeling good. Let's play him 30 minutes in the playoffs, see what happens.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited to kind of see now that he's signed to the team. Obviously, the team is making an investment in him. I'm kind of curious to see, obviously with him, his size is an issue with playing in the post, right? That's kind of the big knock on him, is him being undersized. But man, those post moves, man, you can't deny that boy got game.
Oh, he's smooth. Yeah. And if you actually look at some before and after pictures, he's trimmed down a lot from the beginning of the season. Obviously he's and he still looks big out there, but when you look at how he looked in the summer league compared to now, he's definitely been putting in the work, and that shows on the court as well. And yeah, I mean, I obviously still have concerns about his defensive mobility, and I'm not sure, how much he'll actually be able to contribute in the playoffs, but he might get a shot now. We've only got 3 bigs that are healthy on the Grizzlies whole roster. So I'm excited. Yeah. He has some cool nicknames. One is I'm not a fan of because it just makes fun of his weight, but the other one is Gen Zebo, and I think that's the best nickname. Basically, Zebo. I think that's awesome. The other one is Snack Randolph, and so it sounds funny, but I'm not a fan of making fun of guys' weight. So I prefer Gen Zebo, but I get why people came up with the other one too.
You know what, man? I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and she was sitting there looking at all the math slander that was coming across her phone, and then looking at all the Luka fat joke stuff. She was like, y'all are the rudest people as NBA fans. All y'all do is fat shame.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it with Zion too for a while, and yeah, not a huge fan of that. I think it's cool to criticize guys' games and all of that, but body image, I think that's something that should be off topic for the most part. It's those kind of nicknames I try to avoid, but I also get where they're coming from, and yeah, NBA fans are ruthless, man.
It definitely gets toxic, but I mean, honestly, Chance, dude, that's kind of why we started a podcast, man, just because of just how much BS gets put out there. Because, you got all these talking heads, from Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins of the world that they don't necessarily do deep dives into everything, right? It's all just talking points. We're going to say what's hot, and no matter what effect it has on that other person, what I mean? And dude, I'm glad that we've got our own platform where we can come out here and just kind of break apart and filter through some of the BS, man, because it's definitely a lot of BS that they throw out there, man. It gets pretty crazy.
It does for sure.
Well, Chauncey, in case y'all don't know, I call Chance Chauncey. I don't know why, but I just call him Chauncey sometimes. But so Chauncey,
just one of the nicknames that just kind of stuck. We'll go with it.
One of the nicknames. The dust is finally settled.
Yep.
So we know our teams. So here we go. So now, guys, we're moving into this new play-in series that the league has had going on. What, this is the third year now?
So it started the pandemic year because it was kind of improvised, right? Because they had the shortened season. So I remember like they started it that year. And so it was that year. And then, yeah, I guess this is the third or fourth year total that they've been doing it. So I think it's been a pretty good success so far. Definitely makes things more interesting. So now we know who's in the play-in, who's solidified in the top 6. So you want to do a brief rundown on that for those that didn't pay attention over the weekend? Because it was a lot. It was a lot of moving pieces. Like, did you see the chart, like going into Sunday, like how many different, particularly in the West, like how many different outcomes based on how those last 4 games played out?
Dude, that thing looked longer than the 10 Commandments, man. That thing was like this long.
Like teams could finish anywhere from like 5th to 10th, depending on like certain outcomes. It was crazy. So I'll let you like go over what the final result ended up being from that.
So guys, so the final result. So if you remember, it used to be the top 8 teams in each conference made the playoffs. Now it stops at the top 6, and then 7 through 10 have to go into the play-in series before they can make it into the playoffs. We're out of the 4 remaining teams in each conference, only 2 of them will make it in. They're fighting for the 7th and 8th seed. So let's start with the West. In the West, the 7th seed is going to be the Los Angeles Lakers, and then the 8th seed is the Minnesota Timberwolves. They will play each other in competition for the 7th seed, which will go on to play against the Memphis Grizzlies. All right. From there, the loser of that game will then go on to play the winner of seeds 9 and 10 in the Western Conference. Seed 9 is the New Orleans Pelicans, and seed 10 is the Oklahoma City Thunder. The winner of that game will then play the loser of the Los Angeles Lakers and Minnesota game. And then whoever wins that game will be pegged as the 8th seed, and they will go against the number 1 seeded Denver Nuggets. All right, moving to the East. In the Eastern Conference, you have at number 7, you have the Miami Heat, and at number 8, you have the Atlanta Hawks. The winner of that game, and that play-in game, will go on to play the number 2 seeded Celtics. All right. The loser of that game will go on to play the winner of the Toronto 9 seed and then the 10 seed Chicago Bulls. And then whoever wins that game will then go in as the 8th seed to play against the one and only Milwaukee Bucks. So that's kind of the layout of what we're looking at here in the play-in series. I think it's going to be exciting. You got a lot of teams who are going to be fighting for the seeding position going into the playoffs. So I think it'll be fighting. I think it'll be a fun thing to watch. Now, Chance, what are your predictions going into tomorrow into these play-in games?
So definitely excited to watch. Biggest one, the Lakers Timberwolves, just the fallout from the Timberwolves drama, which we haven't even gotten into that. But basically, to sum up, for those that missed out on this shenanigans, because the NBA has once again gone 0 days without unnecessary drama. So you've got Rudy Gobert and Kyle Anderson on the sidelines getting into it. And all of a sudden, Gobert reaches across like 4 teammates and throws a punch at Kyle Anderson and hits him in the chest. So literally like just punches a teammate. And we've had, the Draymond thing, but that was like a, behind closed doors at practice. We've had reports of other guys getting punched. I can't remember a time where I've just seen a guy punch his teammate there in the middle of a game, and not only just a game, but like a really, really important seeding wise game that was the difference between them having to win one game on that 7-8 line or the difference between them having to go in and win 2 back-to-back to make the playoffs. So that whole story was just crazy. There were reports that Kyle Anderson called him a bitch and all this other stuff. And so Rudy Gobert got mad and threw a punch because he was saying he was playing hurt. And I have to, before we get into the prediction, I have to read off this tweet that I saw earlier from Woj today, where the Timberwolves actually suspended Gobert for the game. So they're going to be playing this game without Rudy Gobert. And Woj tweeted, and I thought this was a parody because it said, the Timberwolves had to suspend Gobert for throwing a punch, but accepted that it was a shot to chest with no intent to injure Kyle Anderson, and understood that Anderson called Gobert a bitch repeatedly on a night Gobert was playing hurt, sources tell
ESPN. Dude, that's the biggest cat. Like, that's just the biggest, like, all right, we got to come up with an excuse to not like suspend them for the rest of the season. Let's
Yeah.
just like say, hey, we understood it was just a tussle. So
Yeah, it
like,
was
because
just a light punch. And to be fair, he called him a bitch a few times. So, you know.
and it's like, oh, it's not. It's the real. We all know the real reason is that they mortgaged their future for Rudy Gobert, and
Mhm.
things haven't been great. And you can't just. You got to do something with them, right? You can't just have that, right? So they're
Right.
like, all right, this is what we could do. We'll suspend them one game.
Yeah.
We'll
Let him
suspend them
come
one
back
game to
for the next
suffice
one.
that, but we'll let him come back because at the end of the day, all of them will look stupid if he doesn't play at all in these playing tournaments. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we all know the truth. But Chance, did you see Draymond Green? He got his
Oh,
clap
yes.
back. So if y'all don't remember, this off season, at the beginning, prior to the season starting, when all these teams were in training camp, the big news was Draymond sucker punched Jordan Poole, and then in that moment, Rudy Gobert decided to hit the interwebs and decided to put out a tweet, basically saying what insecurity speaks loud or something like that. And if you got
Insecurity is always loud.
yeah,
Was it?
insecurity is always allowed. And then obviously, if you know, there's a long standing beef between Draymond Green and Rudy Gobert over Defensive Player of the Year awards. And so when this situation happened, Draymond Green made sure to make sure he got his lick back. And
So he tweeted the exact same thing. Insecurity is
yeah.
always loud that night. And my question is, so they played that afternoon too. How
Mm-hmm.
quickly, once Draymond got in the locker room, did he pull out his phone and have that tweet ready to go?
Oh, man,
Was it in the drafts already? Was he waiting for
no,
this?
he knew it was happening. He read the
Oh yeah,
script.
yeah, yeah. He knew because there have been reports throughout the season and in past seasons with Utah that Rudy Gobert might not be a guy that people just like to not only play with but just be around in general.
Right.
Obviously, we had the whole COVID thing where he made questionable decisions then, and people were kind of
Mm-hmm.
questioning that. And then, like ever since then, like guys like Donovan Mitchell, who are like well liked by pretty much everyone within the
Everybody.
league, like
Yeah.
when someone like that has beef with a guy, then you're like, okay, that's one thing. And then he goes to Minnesota, and some of those same reports come out. If you go back and watch the video, Kyle Anderson wasn't the only one that was getting into it with Gobert too. Torian
Mm-hmm.
Prince was kind of going at it with him too. So I think this might be a Rudy Gobert problem, not so much, but at the end of the day, that happened. You also have Jaden McDaniels punching a wall and fracturing his
Man.
hand,
So
which we haven't
one
even
thing
got
that
into.
they're not even saying, they're not even releasing like the full information on that just yet. But I think he's done. I think he's probably
Yeah, he
done
is.
for
They said
yeah.
he's out for the season. Yeah.
See,
Yep.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, so that, and what's funny is that was the first punch thrown. That was, he basically got his second personal foul and just go into the tunnel and punch the wall. And so that punch
And
ruined his chances. And then Rudy Gobert punches Kyle Anderson. So I mean, the Timberwolves season just completely taking a turn after they really turned things around over the past month or so before that.
right, yeah. Just this, I think that was a disaster game. I think they probably just would have just rather had everybody sit out that game and just take their chances.
Right, right. So that leads me to covering the game. When you look at Lakers Timberwolves,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm a Grizzlies fan, right? Here in Memphis, massive Grizz fan. So the winner of this game has a 7-game series against the Grizzlies in the first round. After seeing that complete shit show yesterday, I
Mm-hmm.
would love to face the Timberwolves in the first round. Let them somehow find a way to win this game so we can play them. We played them last year. It was a great series, back and forth. Grizzlies really should have lost that series, to be honest. We got
Yeah.
outplayed, I think, 5 out of the 6 games, but
Yeah.
I would love to play them with all this that's going on right now. I think that would be complete comedy, but I don't see that happening. I think the Lakers are
Nah.
going to take care of business pretty easily in that game. You got LeBron putting his crown back on. He's in playoff mode. He's ready to go. So definitely see the Lakers winning that one. And then on the other end, was it Hawks Heat on the other
Yep.
side?
Hawks Heat. Winner plays the Celtics.
That one, I think I'm going with the Heat just because I think they've got the mental toughness in a do or die situation. Give me Jimmy Butler. And so I think I'm going with the Heat on that one. So those are my picks for the first 2 games. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm the exact same way, man. This Lakers team, they since they made this trade, they won like 18 games. And
I think they're
18.
18-8 over their last 20, 26 games. That's the best record in the league since then.
Yeah, 18-8 over in the last third of a season, man. That's incredible when you start thinking about how this team started off the season. This was a
Yeah.
team where we were sitting there questioning, oh, when are they going to get their first win?
Yeah.
or,
I remember there were a
like,
lot of times we got on here and recorded and we are like, their season's completely done. Like there's no, like,
yeah,
let LeBron get us 30 a game and chalk it up. And to see where they've come from there is crazy.
dude, it got to the point, Chance, where even like when we, we had to come up with our list and do our homework of who do we think are going to win some of these NBA awards, or who are our picks for these NBA awards. And dude, I started thinking about Rob Pelinka for Executive of the Year.
Isn't that crazy?
It's so crazy. The only reason why I didn't give it to him because you got him in that mess to begin with. But
Right.
you know what I mean? But man, just by able to put, like, Danny Ainge gave them a gift by taking Westbrook on and all that stuff, because man, they got all the pieces that they needed to be successful for a playoff run, man. So I don't even think that game's going to be close. No Rudy Gobert, I mean, Naz Reid has been
McDaniels is
great.
arguably a bigger loss. Naz Reid out
Yeah,
too.
yeah. McDaniels is what their best wing defender
Yeah.
on that team, man. And then so now you lose two of your best defenders on your team, interior and on the perimeter, dude. I think the Lakers are going to wipe them up quick by the second half. And then you start talking about Miami and Atlanta. I'm going with Miami, man, because I've seen all that stuff. Jimmy Butler talking, man. He said, I'm not coming here to lose.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Butler's one of those people that can back up what they say.
Oh, 100%. He's done it.
So yeah, and so I'm going with Miami, and honestly, I'd be surprised if that Laker Minnesota game is close. And honestly, I would not be too surprised if Miami just handles Atlanta.
Yeah.
Playing at home, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Miami just handles Atlanta real quick, and then and sends Atlanta going on to that next little round. So that's kind of how I feel about that. And then, Chance, we got the Pels, OKC, and then Toronto and Chicago. How are you feeling about those games? Do you think we're gonna get an upset out of one of those?
I don't think we'll get an upset just yet. I think Pelicans over the Thunder. I really like what the Thunder did this season. I think that their over under was like 26 and a half wins on the season. They ended up with 40 wins, potentially 41 on the play in. That doesn't necessarily count, but either way, they're getting 40 plus wins, way over their projection. But I think the Pelicans just have too much talent even without Zion. They've been in these high pressure games before. They're at home. I do think the Pelicans end up winning that one. And then on the other end, Bulls, Raptors. I actually really like what the Raptors have done since the trade deadline as well, when they decided to go ahead and stick with it and pretty much keep their core together, trade for Jakob Poeltl. I'm picking the Raptors to beat the Bulls, so I think you'll end up with the situation where the Raptors and the Pelicans move on to fight another day and get that end of week game to fight for that 8 seed is what I've got.
Dude, I think we might have our first disagreement on these play-ins, Chance. I am actually going with the Thunder for the upset.
Are you?
Here's my reason. The Pels have not been very consistent as of late. Obviously, like they've gone through big extreme highs and lows throughout this whole season, from going on win streaks to going on big losing skids. So the Pels have been a team that they just had hard time just putting it all together. But then also they've had Ingram, they've had Zion in and out of the lineup for a good part of the season, and Zion is still out. Right. So you look at this OKC team, this OKC team for a lot of the season has honestly kind of been holding back to their full potential. Like Shea hasn't played in all the games where he could have probably been available to play. Right. Like they've strategically not played him all these games. They're gonna pull out this team with this full roster in OKC with all these young boys who got something to prove. I think this game is gonna be Shea's breakout game into the world, showing people like, hey, this is why I need to be on those first team All NBA ballots.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'll probably be rooting for that. The Thunder have been a fun story so far. So I would love to see them keep advancing and keep shocking the world for sure.
And
What
then,
about over in the Eastern game?
yeah, man, I want to say Toronto. But it's kind of hard. You tell me I got DeMar DeRozan in a winner takes all game. Man, I could see DeMar just going crazy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And taking over, because that's really what these games are. It's just a winner takes all
Oh
type of
yeah.
game. Like, we just rolling the ball out, seeing what's gonna happen. But Toronto is the better team. So if I had to bet money on it, I'm gonna have to bet on the Raptors. But I wouldn't be overly surprised.
Yeah. What about on the next round? So on my side, I would have the Timberwolves against the Pelicans. And that is a straight up winner keeps going. Winner gets the 8 seed in the scenario. Loser goes home. So this is one that I kind of struggled with, just because you'd have Rudy Gobert coming back in this scenario. Um, Timberwolves played really well down the stretch, but ultimately I do think the McDaniels injury just really crushes them. And so
Mm-hmm.
you've got guys like Brandon Ingram on the other side. I don't know how Minnesota would get stops. So I think I'd roll with the Pelicans to go ahead and get the 8 seed. So in my scenario, I'd have the Lakers with the 7 seed and then the Pelicans getting the 8 seed on that end. And then on the other side, this would be my one big upset. I would actually have the Raptors winning from the 9-10 and then going in and beating Atlanta, and the Raptors taking that 8 seed. They went all in this season. They decided they want to make the playoffs and continue getting experience, and I think they have the talent to do it. So I'd go with the Raptors to win that one and be my final playoff spot.
Yep, I agree with you in the East. No argument there. But in the West, um, um, oh yeah,
So
you
you would
said the
have
Pels. You said
Thunder.
you said the
You would
Pels
have
beat Minnesota. I would agree with that piece. But on my end, I'm going with the Thunder all the
you
way. I
rolling
see
with
the
the
Thunder.
Thunder to get the
I'm
8 seed.
rolling with the Thunder. I'm rolling with the Thunder to take the 8 seed, man. I think the Thunder are going to make the doggone playoffs and shock the world.
I
And then,
honestly, I'll be rooting for your picks because I love the Thunder so far this season. So I'd love to get them. And honestly, like, I really don't think either side will have a chance out east. I don't see either of those teams beating
nah,
the Bucks in a series. Same with
nah.
Denver. Unless the
Mm-mm,
Lakers happen to drop their first game and then they fall to
mm-hmm.
that line and it's a Lakers Nuggets matchup. But we both discussed why we don't think that's going to happen in the first place. So any of these other
Yeah,
teams, I don't see them beating the Nuggets. So why not give me the Thunder? Give the young team a chance to get some playoff experience. I'll be rooting for that. But ultimately, I think they'll just need another year before they're fully ready. But I mean, we've been saying that all season, and they just kept winning. So who knows?
man. Yeah, you're right, man. You're right. So, Chance. So today, before this call, we put together our individual picks for some of these end of the season awards. Okay.
Yep.
So let's run through these, and I want to hear who you got for these awards, and I'm going to go through who I got. You want to start with the smaller awards first, or the big ones first? It's up to you. Your call.
Let's start small so we can work our way up to the big ones. I like that idea.
Okay, let's start small. Executive of the year. I'm gonna give who I got. We'll do a snake, and then we'll just kind of do it that way.
All right.
Executive of the year. I've got Monty McNair with the Kings, man. I I I like the moves that he's made between last year, this offseason, and then to what this team is now. I actually do. I was actually on the fence between picking either him or Daryl Morey, because Daryl Morey, for getting off of Ben Simmons' contract,
Mm-hmm.
who would have ever thought that it would have ended in this way? Because now that deal where, when that deal first happened, I was probably on the side saying, man, I don't know. I think the Nets got the better end of the trade.
Uh huh. Yep.
But now when you look at it and you sit there and look at Ben Simmons' deal and how much money he has left on his contract, man, I really almost was about to pick Daryl Morey, but then, man, I started looking up in the sky and I saw that beam just lit. And I said, man, I got to roll with those doggone Sacramento Kings.
That's a good one. That was one that I was deciding between. I think the Beam story by itself gets them some bonus points, but just
Right.
looking back at that trade last season and how he got scrutinized so much for giving up Halliburton and seeing what that has done to their offense. Kevin Herter was also a great low-key addition as well for them. So I was really considering picking him as well. Ultimately, I went up with, and this might be kind of a hot take, I'm not sure, but I went with Danny Ainge just because they went full rebuild, and I think they have been off to the best rebuild you could have. First
Yeah.
off, I think the Rudy Gobert fleece automatically gets him bumped up to the top 2 just because of that. That might end up being one of the biggest fleece trades in all of NBA history, especially after what transpired yesterday. But just overall, the amount of draft capital he's built up from shipping out Mitchell, from shipping out Gobert, even some of the trades during the season of getting Conley out and Vanderbilt out, and some of these guys to really just collect so many draft assets. I think they're really set up. And Walker Kessler actually looked like a
Yeah.
potential all-star in the future as well. I loved how he played in his rookie season. And so, yeah, like they finished outside of the playoffs, and they pretty much did what they're expected. But there are a lot of fun times within that season where they looked like they played really well together. And I think this could be like a pretty quick rebuild where they take all these assets and turn that into just more guys that can win now. And I think he's pretty much done rebuilding the best you could do, which is just maximizing the return. He basically flipped the whole like stock market as far as like NBA players' values go, to where now everybody's worth 4 or 5 first round picks because of what Danny Ainge was able to do. So I'd put him up there. I have no idea like what the odds are for this award and who is expected to win it, but I think one of these 2 guys that we just mentioned should have the best chances because they both, for their own reasons, had tremendous moves that they made throughout the past 365 days.
I do like that Danny Ainge pick because then too, also when you think about it, like this team isn't that far away from being a stable playoff contender. Like
there were
this
times
team,
during this season when they were like, "Hey, should we just go for a win now and trade some of these picks and get another guy?" So yeah, I think this rebuild could go really quickly.
All right, who you got for Coach of the Year, Chance?
This, I think, is one of the biggest locks. You called it months ago. It's Mike Brown. I don't see. I mean, there are times throughout the season where I thought it could be Missoula from the Celtics, or there are a couple other guys. But throughout the season, the Kings just kept working their way up. It got really close to creeping up for the 2nd seed, and they're projected to be outside, not even of the playoffs, but I'm pretty sure they're projected to not even be in the play-in. So seeing what they've done, like I think this is an easy way. It's Mike Brown. You agree?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. I mean, I've been riding with Mike Brown on this for a while now. I mean, you start talking about being able to come in and immediately impact culture and change. Dude, nobody has done it better in a while.
Mm-hmm.
For you to go into a laughing stock for literally almost my whole life, almost.
Yeah.
For you to go into this situation and then put a winning culture in there. And then get all these players bought in on this certain type of play style, which this play style is vastly different than a lot of other Mike Brown teams. So it shows that
it's crazy. He used to be like, he's won Coach of the Year before for his defense. Like those Cavs teams were like the best defensive team, and now it's completely flipped. It just shows how versatile he is as a coach, which speaks highly of him.
It shows that he knows and understands how to work with his personnel. And that's not always the case with all coaches. There's a lot of coaches that are in the Hall of Fame, and it's not because they knew how to work with their personnel. It's just because they had great systems and they stuck with it, and that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But Mike Brown was like, hey, we're throwing all that stuff we did in Cleveland in the trash, and this is what we're going to do with this team. So, man, Mike Brown has done he obviously has learned from his time in Golden State and sitting on the sidelines as an assistant coach. And that's all you can ask for with these coaches.
Yep.
All right. Clutch player of the year. You know who I got, Chance?
Who you got?
It's crazy, man. I have gone Kings. So I went with De'Aaron Fox, man. A reason why I went with De'Aaron Fox because this was an interesting award for me. But when I started looking up all these different like clutch stats and all that stuff, man, and everything was pointing to De'Aaron Fox at the top of the list. Like when you start looking at, he has the most field goal attempts in the clutch this season, and the highest field goal efficiency. So
yeah, he's shooting like 56%, right, in the clutch.
Yeah, he's shooting 55.5% in the clutch. The next highest person is Donovan Mitchell with 46% at 111 attempts. Excuse me. The next highest percentage is actually my guy Jalen Brunson at 54.9%, which he's been a monster in the clutch. However, he just doesn't have the same amount of field goal attempts. He's only attempted 91 shots.
Hmm.
But for you to have that crazy efficiency, when you to be the leader in efficiency and the leader in attempts, I really don't think it's much of an argument for anybody else, in my perspective, based off of what I went on this award. I don't necessarily know what metrics you use to rank this award, but this is a all new award, Chance. So let me hear what you got.
Exact same thing, man. I think this one is actually just as much of a no-brainer when you look at the clutch stats. Yeah, look at the field goal percentage, just clutch points in total. De'Aaron Fox had 180. Next highest was DeMar DeRozan with 138. Him and Butler were tied with 138. So he scored literally 42 more clutch points than anybody else. And so you could say like, oh, well, that's because he was in more clutch games. But when you point to the efficiency, it was higher than anybody else as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just how many games do you remember watching the Kings at midnight? Everybody's asleep. The Kings are just out there in that West Coast, and De'Aaron Fox is just
Mm-hmm.
hitting clutch shot after clutch shot to light the beam. I think Shea had a great case earlier in the year. Shea was making some big shots and had some great clutch numbers, but just as the season progressed, De'Aaron Fox just continued to put up insane numbers down the clutch. I think it's an interesting award, and it's fun, at least just to get people talking and get people looking at some of those clutch stats that might have otherwise just been, never looked at before. So I think it
Right.
sparks an interesting conversation, and I do think De'Aaron Fox is very well deserving of this. I think he's just been absolutely insane on the clutch, and definitely agree with you there. So your Kings on the first three so far,
Man,
and
lighting the beam.
yep, you're all in on the beam.
Well, Chance, six man of the year. Who you got?
This one actually changed around the past month. This is the one that's been, I think, most open, but I ended up going with Emmanuel Quickly. What he's done over the past few weeks, he has just been absolutely insane off the bench, and the Knicks are rolling right now. So there are a couple other contenders for this one, but I ended up going with Quickly. But curious to see what your thoughts are on this one.
Dude, for the longest I thought it was gonna be Brogdon, honestly. Because
Yeah,
think
he
about it.
was up there.
You look at the season the Celtics have had. He's been so consistent coming off that bench for him. But I actually went with Quickly as well, man. My
Yep.
reasoning with going with Quickly is because you sit there and you look at their stats. Their stats are very similar. You're splitting hairs between the two about what type of what they give on both teams.
Hmm.
But the big difference, and this isn't all on their players. A lot of this has to go with their teams and how that they are used on both teams. But man, the on off numbers for Quickly were crazy to me. His on off is plus 8.1.
Yep.
And then you still looking at Brogdon, his on off is negative 2.5, which whenever, and for our listeners out there, you got to think about this. Whenever these six men come into the game, usually it's not uncommon for their on off to be in the negative, because that means starters are coming out of the games, right?
Hmm.
So these guys are playing in these bench roles. So that's not necessarily a do or die stat. But when you sit there and you look at what Quickly is giving his team, man, he's giving his team a whole 10 points better than what Brogdon is giving his. And so that way
Yep.
I just had to go with Quickly, man. He's been balling out for those for the Knicks, man, and he's been a big piece in what has turned this whole Knicks season around.
Yep.
All right. Most improved player. I don't feel like we're going to argue on this one either, Chance. I
Yeah,
really
I thought
don't.
this one was pretty obvious. I had Laurie Marketing on this one.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
agree?
I had other people. I mean, I thought about like a Jalen Brunson
Yep.
deserves some hype. I mean, but at the end of the day, no one's like, you're like, okay, Jalen Brunson can hoop, but nobody's like surprised he's doing what he's doing, you
Right.
know. But Larry Markkinen, he had been in the league for what was this, his fourth year, fifth year?
Yeah, fourth or fifth, and I mean, he was
And,
just a guy that was just like an afterthought, you know?
yeah,
And so
people were starting to label him as a bust. You know what I mean?
mhm,
But then he put together a solid offseason this summer where you saw him playing with his national team, and he balled out there, and then he brought that same game into this year with Utah Jazz. Larry Markkinen went from averaging 14.8 points a game, 8.6 rebounds, to averaging almost 10 points more a game at 25.6 points a
yeah,
game, and then still average 8.6 rebounds. But he's also doing it while shooting 50% from the field.
yeah,
So
like
when I
this is
said
it wasn't just a volume increase, it was
no,
efficiency too.
It's efficiency. His PER has gone up as well. I mean, to me, this was an easy pick. And then you start talking about like what that team was expected going into the season. If you bet anything on the over of the Utah Jazz this year, you won. And a lot of it is at the hands of Larry Marketing. He proved himself to be a legitimate all-star this year, and he was deserving. And
Yeah.
then honestly, I mean, like he's proved to Danny Ainge, like, hey, this is somebody you can build your team around. You put the right
Yeah,
pieces around them.
he was untouchable once you got to the deadline because he played so well. And I think this is really one of the hardest awards to discuss and really debate when you've got, because there's no like clear parameters on what most improved looks like. Is it a guy that played 8 minutes a game and then all of a sudden he gets a bigger role of 25 minutes a game and his numbers go up? Is it a guy that was an all-star, but now he's a superstar like Ja Morant last year, which as a diehard Grizzlies fan, I don't think Ja Morant should have won most improved player last year because I think when you've already set the bar that high, you just
Right.
make that natural jump to superstardom. I don't think that's deserving of most improved player, which is why I ruled out Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who is another contender for this award. But I think he was just so good last year. It's just that people weren't really paying attention to that team. Jalen Brunson was the other one, but I do think Jalen Brunson, particularly once he got into that playoff stretch, like he really showed that like this guy's got it. He can ball too. And so like, yeah,
Right.
he goes to a new situation and he puts up better numbers. But I think as far as like the way I view the award as somebody who really made a drastic improvement, whether that be from borderline unplayable to, solid
Right.
role player or like a solid role player into a, perennial all-star. And I think Laurie made a jump that was large enough to where it is no question. And I'd be surprised if he doesn't end up winning the award
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah. To me, this is the surprise me award. Am I surprised by what you're doing? And for
Right.
most of the year, I was surprised by what Lowry's doing. Now,
Exactly.
I know on any given night, he's gonna give me 20 and 10 almost every single night at a high efficiency. So
Yep.
shout out to Lowry for a good year. So now, Chance, rookie of the year, who you got?
I think this one's pretty obvious too. It's been obvious basically since opening night. This one's got to be Paolo Banchero. I do think there were times in the first half of the season when Benedict Mathurin made a strong push. He kind of fell off a little bit, had his ups and downs as most rookies do. And I do think towards the end of the season, Jalen Williams made a very strong push. And I could see him getting some votes, but I don't think he did enough to overtake Paolo. But curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
Man, dude, I was sitting there trying hard to make Jalen Williams my pick. But I
Yep.
just couldn't do it, man. You sit there and you look at it. Jalen Williams averaging 14, 4, 3, shooting 52% from the field. That's amazing. However, when I sit there and look across the board and I sit there and look at Paolo's beating him in points, 20 points a game. He's beating him in rebounds, 6.9 boards a game. And then even assists, he's averaging 3.7 assists per game. He is shooting the ball at 42%, but a lot of that's just because Paolo's just shooting. he's shooting everything on that team,
I feel
right?
like he made like 3 threes after the All-Star break. I feel like he was like 3 for 100 from 3 post All-Star break. But, that's not
Yeah.
entirely his game. And he's
That's
still,
not his game. Yeah.
he has a lot riding on his shoulders and carrying the offensive load where Jalen has more help too, to your point.
He does. But and defenses are, Paolo was in that game plan. Jalen Williams wasn't in a lot of teams' game plans until probably after the All-Star break, and so,
Mm-hmm.
but however, that is not to take away from what Jalen Williams has done. So he's been getting consistent minutes. Jalen Williams has been doing everything for that team. And start talking about offense, defense, man, he's really showing. You put him next to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander for the next 10 years, man, that team is going to be a tough team.
Yep.
All right, Chance. This award is probably near and dear to your heart right now because just like every other Grizz fan, I already know who you're going to pick for this award, I'm sure, for Defensive Player of the Year. But I'll tell you who I'm picking first. Let me tell you who I'm picking first.
I'm just going to surprise you right here. I'm going with Brook Lopez. It can't be Jaren. Brook Lopez, he's the third best defender on the Bucks, and the Bucks are a great defensive team. He's got guys like Giannis and Drew Holiday that are over there like shutting things down. So he's just swatting a few shots for the people that happen to get by two of the best perimeter defenders in the league. It's got to be Brook Lopez, right? That's just a no question, right?
No, I'm going with Jaren, man. I'm going with Jaren. I mean, you sit there and you look at like what he brings you guys, what he brings the Grizz on defense. I honestly, I mean, I was one of the people waving the flag that that he should have got more love for this last year. But I think this year, he's strung together a solid resume as far as games played this year. He stayed out of foul trouble for him to the best of his ability.
The foul rate did go down.
Yeah, it's still a little bit of a concern. However,
Mm-hmm.
Jaren was the heart and soul of that Memphis Grizzlies defense this year. And then also when you start looking at the other people that it could have been, I honestly, this is probably a wild card. I think Caruso needs a little bit more love in this, just because from as a perimeter guard, Caruso is by far the best defender in the league. Because if you sit there and you look at defensive efficiency amongst players, most of these guys are bigs. Caruso is like the only guard on most of these lists. But anyways, yeah, I'm going with Jaren on that chance. I'm assuming you're picking Jaren as well.
I've got to go Jaren as well. And not to discredit what Brook Lopez has done, because I do understand the argument for him. I do also think that he is potentially the third best defender on that team. But what he does for the Bucks is he allows Giannis to free roam because he shuts down the paint so well. So I do respect what Brook Lopez has done. But with Jaren, as you've said, he completely changes the entire defensive philosophy of the Grizzlies, where he's able to be that free roamer. And I watched so many games where he gets literally 4 blocks in the first quarter, and the rest of the game, teams are just not entering the paint because of what he's doing on defense. When you look at his on-off numbers, the team is just so much better defensively when he's on the court. He is by far the most important player for the Grizzlies, and he really made a case to just be flat out the best player on the Grizzlies over the last 30 or so days of the season. He's just been absolutely dominant. And I do think this will be probably the most split-haired vote out of all the awards that we're looking at. I think some of these are like really obvious choices, whereas Defensive Player of the Year, for whatever reason, I do think it should be an obvious choice, but this is one where I feel like there's been a lot of debate around Brook Lopez, some of the other perimeter guys as well. But ultimately, I think this is an award that's got Jaren's name written on it, and I'm hoping that he ends up getting it, because I do think it's well-deserved.
Yep. No argument there. So, Chance. Most valuable player. I said who I was rolling with last week, and I'm sticking to it. Who are you picking for most valuable player now at the end of the season?
This one has just been so hard for me throughout. Ultimately, I did switch up, and I'm going with Joel Embiid.
Wow.
I think the way he played to end the season, I think he's really solidified it. I was really out when, for one, he missed the matchup against Jokic, but Jokic has been my guy pretty much for most of the season, but I think they really did kind of fall off towards the end. I don't know if that's partly fatigue on his end or partly them just having the 1 seed locked up for so long that they didn't really have to do as much. Ultimately, I think it came down to all 3 of these guys have been the best 3 players in the league for the past few years now. Giannis has MVPs. Jokic has multiple MVPs. Embiid's the only guy that hasn't yet. He was the leading scorer in the NBA. He was one of the most efficient big men in the NBA. He's also a dominant defender. So ultimately, my tiebreaker was, I do think Embiid deserves an MVP, and this is the year that he really gave it all out to get it. So I think it would be a travesty if he just ended his career and didn't have an MVP. So that was my tiebreaker vote, but I understand a point for all 3 of these guys. I just think Embiid deserves one at this point. And I mean, he was just so dominant. This Sixers team, where would they be without the way Embiid played this season? And I do think they have a real shot to make a deep run, and it's all on his shoulder. So I ultimately went with Embiid, but it's a strong case for any of the 3. So you're sticking with, you had Giannis, right?
Yeah, I'm sticking with Giannis. Same reasons, man. I mean, like, you're splitting hairs picking any of them. You look at their stat lines, you can pull them all up. I mean, it's literally tit for tat on a lot of this stuff. Like, even the games played, they all played around the same amount of games. I think Giannis may have played like 3 or 4 games less than those guys, but it's all in the same realm. You start looking like the points, rebounds, just all that stuff, man. You're splitting hairs going down that list. So what it came down to me was best player, best team. So like that's what the MVP award used to be like that almost every year. It was like, hey, you were if your team was number 1 and you were the best player and you deserved it, that's who got it. I'm just going with the old school way of picking it, man. I think Giannis deserves it. I understand the whole narrative behind the narrative piece behind giving awards. I'm not really big on narrative awards, but I'm big on, hey, let's look at everything in this season in a vacuum. And for me, if I'm doing that, I got to go with Giannis. I do. if I did not pick Giannis, well, as my second pick, it would be Embiid, though. I would pick Embiid over Jokic.
Yep. I think I would go Giannis as my second as well. I would go, which is crazy because I've been Team Joker from basically the very beginning of the season. I've been Team Joker. So, yeah, I would at this point, I'd go Embiid, Giannis, but it's literally like 1A, 1B. And then I think Jokic is really 1C. Like, it's honestly, like, it's just so close. And I'm really curious to see how the votes end up shaking out. But, yeah, that one in Defensive Player of the Year, I'm really curious to see how they end up getting voted on. But I think it's a strong case for any of them, for sure.
Chance, for your all-defense team, who you got making the all-defense team?
So I'll start with the previously mentioned. Yeah, we'll just do first team. Started with Jaren Jackson and Lopez. You have to pencil both of them in for all the reasons we discussed. I also went with Drew Holiday for some of the same reasons as far as him on the perimeter. Marcus Smart as another guard. And then another sleeper pick is actually Jaden McDaniels. And I think you're going to see why in these play-in games when you see how teams are able to run circles around the Timberwolves and you realize – I mean, you saw the stats of he basically had more possessions guarding like star players than anybody else and shut them all down below their below their season averages. I think McDaniels is one of the most underrated defenders in the entire league. So I ended up going with him as my fifth spot. There's a few guys there in that fourth or fifth spot that I had some trouble with too.
Dude, this was hard.
Yeah, there's a couple, but there's so many guys.
Because there's so many stats to look at with we start talking defense. And then there's a lot of stats that you can get allured by and looking at, but then you start looking at these games and you start saying, okay, who's actually, you watch these games, who makes more of a defensive impact to their team? So like defense is just so hard it's not as easy as looking at like a scoring leaders list and just kind of doing that stuff, man. But what I ended up settling on, Caruso, Paul George, Draymond Green, Jaren Jackson, and Brook Lopez. However, the Paul George was my last throw-in pick at a guard. I think I might swap him out for Drew Holiday, actually. But whatever, that's my all defense team. However you want to look at it.
Yeah, I like the Caruso pick. I really wanted to put Anthony Davis in there. I think he was absolutely dominant, especially down the stretch, but he just missed so many games. It's hard to rely on that. But, a lot of these guys missed a lot of games, so it's really splitting hairs at that point too. Ultimately, it's crazy because you look at the NBA and scoring numbers are going up, pace is going up, efficiency is going up, offense is going up across the board. But it also seems like we have so many good lockdown defenders too that, there's so many good individual defenders, more than you would think when you look at, how many points teams score nowadays. But yeah, there's a lot of good defenders in the league and it's a tough award or just a tough team to pick in general. I think this will be one that's really debated as well. And I'm curious to see who ends up getting those 5 spots.
Yeah. Chance, all NBA. First team. Who you got in the All-NBA first team?
So the first thing I had to decide here is Embiid or Jokic because as of this year, next year that'll change when it goes to position list, but as of this year, you can only do one center. So unfortunately, somebody who was a top 3 player in the league, regardless of which one you pick, is going to be left out of first team. Ultimately, I went with Embiid because of just the reasons I discussed. I think he scored more. I think he was overall more meaningful. We both have Embiid over Jokic as far as overall, awards and everything. So I went Embiid first. The second thing I did was put Giannis in there because he's been a top 3 player all season too. And he doesn't play the same position as one of my other MVP frontrunners. So I threw Giannis in there next. The third thing I did was put Jason Tatum in because he was an MVP frontrunner for the first half of the season. They kind of fell off a little bit towards the middle and end, but ultimately he's been a superstar throughout, continues to get better. So that is what I did first. And then I had to pick 2 guards, and that's where it got a little tougher. But I don't see how you don't have Luka as a guard here, despite the Mavericks struggling down the stretch, despite them not even making the play-in, which is just crazy. But Luka was just absolutely phenomenal, even from the beginning of the season, which I'm very proud of because it seems like it usually takes him until mid-December to get going, whereas he was ready from the jump this season. So I went with Luka, and then the hardest one was that last guard because there's so many front court guys that I thought would have deserved that 5th spot, but having to pick another guard made it tricky because a lot of the best guards missed a lot of time this season. Steph Curry was one of those, but ultimately I did go with Steph Curry for the last spot. I just think he's still just as dominant and just as important to that Warriors team and to their success. So I ended up going with Steph as my other guard with Luka. So I had Curry, Luka, Tatum, Giannis, and Embiid for my 5.
So what I had for my 5 was the center and the forwards were easy to me.
Mhm.
I I did the same exact play you did. I went Embiid, Giannis, and Tatum. That was easy.
Yep.
Then it got hard with the guards because all these guards have missed time
Mhm.
and for all kinds of different reasons. On court, off court, everything. You know what I mean? And I just threw all these guards into a whole pile, and then I
Mhm.
start looking at all of them, and then Luka Doncic just stood out amongst all of
Oh
these
yeah.
guards.
Yep.
Uh, it was crazy, but I was looking for reasons not to put him in there, just because I don't know if I'm still a little hurt by everything.
Right.
I don't know if maybe I'm a little biased, and I would start looking up, trying to compare his stats to like Donovan Mitchell to see if I can get him in there. But man, there was just
Mhm.
no way I could leave Luka Doncic off this list, man. Just
No, you
like
can't.
and not feel like I let my biases get in the way of him making him second team. So I put him
Yep.
in there, but this is where we differ.
This is the spot where I'm really curious to hear your thoughts because I struggled with this last spot.
I went with Shea. I went with Shea because I thought about this and I'm like, you start talking about, I know, you're talking about games played and all this stuff. Shea missed a lot of games, but a lot of those games he missed weren't for real.
Yeah.
And so I took it all in as one, and I started thinking about like when we look back at this year and we say who were some of the most impressive people in the going. I mean, in this year, I think Shea is going to be at the top of that list. You're talking about the type of the type of the games that he's had this year. I thought about
Mhm.
Donovan Mitchell being in that spot as well, because he wouldn't have had 71. You could make a case for Dame, Steph, Ja, De'Aaron Fox. It's a lot of
Fox was one I
cases.
thought about too. Yep.
It's a lot of guys you can make cases for, but man, Shea has balled out this year. So man, I just had to
Yeah.
go with Shea in that spot. But obviously, I mean, here we go, splitting hairs again. I'm not envious of any of the people with votes.
Oh yeah. I think any of those guards you just mentioned, outside, I don't think Ja's going to have a chance, especially at first team, just because of the situation he put
Right.
himself in. So I'd be surprised if he makes really any of the teams because there's so many different guards. I'd put him behind all those other guys just because when you are splitting hairs, go with the guy that didn't wave a gun on Instagram, in my unbiased opinion.
Well,
But
but I think people are going to sympathize for Ja because I think
that could be the case
people
too.
people understand that this is his contract. This is like all these guys we mentioned. None of them need it because none of them
Right.
are dealing with contract stuff right now. So
Right.
I,
This is
I
like a
think it's
$40 million difference for Ja.
yeah, it's a lot of ex players with votes, and I think they're going to be like, "Hey, we need to get him his bread. We get it."
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset with that. I do
Mm.
think that he would be deserving, and I could see him potentially making third team. But yeah, when it came to first team, I had Steph, I considered Shea, Donovan, and De'Aaron Fox was one I really strongly considered too. But ultimately, I just think we take for granted what Steph does and how important he is to that Warriors team. But I could literally see arguments for any of those, and
But
I think Shea is very well deserving as well.
dude, there's a lot of guys. We didn't even talk about James Harden. Has
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Hmm.
like it's a lot of guards out there. I mean, like even like on a like, I mean, he's not all NBA level, but you start talking about like even guards that like who aren't all NBA level. You got these Tyrese Halliburtons of the world who have played
Hmm.
phenomenal this year,
Yeah.
dude. Like it's like the league is stacked with guards, and that's why I think next year is going to be so interesting. Or whenever the new CBA kicks in, it's going to be so interesting seeing this because, dude, like we might live in a world where out of the 15 All NBA spots, that 10 of them are guards.
Right. Yeah.
Jalen Brunson, another person that deserves a lot of
Yep.
high praise
Yeah. Yeah. I could see him making one of the
for
teams
this.
for sure.
So it's a lot, man. Like I mean, I won't be mad. I know whenever the list and stuff comes out, I won't be mad at any of it. I'm sure, just
Yeah, it
because
would have to be
it's a
something
lot
like
deserving guys.
outlandish for me to be
Yeah,
like, okay, that's kind of crazy. Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, so we went through that chance, but there was some stuff that happened over the past couple days. Some
There
people
was.
got eliminated from any playoff contention, and a lot of people are going home for the year. So, you know what that means we need to do, Chance?
Unfortunately, I do.
It's time for some eulogies.
Zach, you're not going to like this, but we've got to start with the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks began their season on October 19th, 2022, and they were eliminated from postseason contention on April 7th, 2023. The Mavs' elimination was completely self-inflicted. They opted to bench nearly every rotation player, despite it being a must-win game against the Chicago Bulls. The Mavs had to decide between attempting to fight for the playoffs or lose as much as possible to keep their top 10 protected pick. The Mavs ultimately chose to just put themselves out of their own misery and take the season, much to the displeasure of Luka Doncic. After trading for disgruntled superstar Kyrie Irving, the Mavs were clearly going all in on a championship this season. Instead, the Mavericks had to suffer through a final game that included Theo Pinson playing 40 minutes. Many might ask where things went wrong with the Mavericks. Was it the hiring of Jason Kidd as head coach, which was a questionable move even at the time? Was it Mark Cuban not paying Jalen Brunson, as Brunson ended up becoming an All-NBA potential player in New York? Was it signing Christian Wood, a guy who never contributed to winning basketball in his 8 years in the league? Was it trading the only player on the team who's capable of playing any defense whatsoever for another ball-dominant guard with an explosive off-the-court personality? With all of these disastrous moves, it's no wonder the Mavs tanked their season away. Although gifted a generational superstar, the Mavs have found so many ways to fondle their attempts at building around Luka. And maybe it's just Mark Cuban being too busy trying to find his next failed business investment on Shark Tank. All we know is this Mavs season will be laid painfully to rest, and Cuban will be spending the summer months making more questionable moves and wondering why Luka is inching closer and closer to requesting out of this shit show. Excuse my language. May the Mavs rest in peace. As a diehard Mavs fan, do you have any final words on your team, Zach?
Here's the thing, man. Mark, you laid an egg, man. You, Mark Cuban, you think you're smarter than everybody, but you're really not. I love you, Mark. I'm passionate about these Mavericks. I paid a lot of money to go see these games and buy these jerseys. But one thing you need to do is shut up and also tell Jason Kidd to shut up too. Because now we getting investigated by the league because we don't even know how to tank properly. You had it right with the whole idea of tanking. I said it on this pod that I agree that we should tank. But we shouldn't be telling people in interviews that we tanking. Because that's how you get fined. But it's not, hey, it's not my money. It's yours. You're entitled to do whatever you want with your money. You got fined $600,000 before by the league for admitting to tanking the year we got Luka. I don't even want to know what that number is going to be now. It could be more than
Jalen Brunson with that money.
Could have paid Jalen. Everything went wrong this offseason when you thought you knew better. You didn't have to go out there talking about Rick Brunson and showing people text messages about his dad and all this type of stuff. Yeah, okay. We get it. We know it. The Knicks got fined for it. So obviously it was proof that it was tampering. Let it ride. Because you know what? Now you look stupid, and we all look stupid. I look stupid walking around here with a Luka Doncic jersey on and everything else, all because of you, Mark Cuban, and these failed experiments. You can't keep treating the Mavericks like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, like hopping in and out of every wave. You can't do it. Mark, I love you, and I hope you know this comes from a deeply concerned fan. Let Nico do his job, and you just go hide away in the abyss like you have most of the season. You've done great, but I don't know why you decide to pop up the last week of the year and start sending out all these memos to Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins and everybody else. Just shh. because I think that would do all of us much better than we are now. That's it.
Wise words. Wise words from a diehard fan. Dallas Mavericks, you will be missed greatly. The Utah Jazz began their season on October 19th, 2022, and they were eliminated from playoff contention on April 6th, 2023. Although expected to be the worst team in the league, the Jazz were one of the most inspiring stories of the first half of the season. Led by a collective effort, they were one of the top seeds in the West throughout the first couple months. Ultimately, the Jazz fell back down to earth and embraced the tank by the end of the season. But the season was one to remember for the Jazz. Lauri Markkanen emerged as a dominant star, and Walker Kessler looked like a rich man's Rudy Gobert at times, except he hasn't punched new teammates yet. The Jazz will now look ahead to the lottery, where they hope to get another difference maker to add to their promising young core of assets. Although the Jazz season is officially dead, we expect a mighty resurrection in the not-so-distant future. Any last words on the Jazz, Zach?
Man, hell of a season to the Jazz. You blew everything up and still was a competitive team. So the Jazz got a super bright future ahead of you. Shout out to my guy Caleb Harrison for telling us about them Jazz, and he was right, man. Jazz had a great year.
Great year, bright future. They will be missed. The Washington Wizards began their season October 19th, 2022, and they were eliminated from playoff contention on April 3rd, 2023. The Wizards were clearly tanking from the very beginning, but they did hold on to future assets like Bradley Beal and Kuzma. The Wizards saw a resurrection from Kristaps Porzingis. Please do not interrupt the minister, who had one of his best seasons of his career after a failed stint with the also deceased Dallas Mavs. The Wizards now hold the 7th best odds to win the Wemby sweepstakes, so all eyes shift to the lottery this summer when it comes to them. Any parting words on the Wizards, Zach, who may not have been tanking, but they should have been?
Yeah, they should have been tanking, but they weren't. I don't know. I mean, we still don't know what they're doing. They're talking about bringing everybody back and signing.
They kind of flip-flop throughout the season.
Yeah, like you gonna give Porzingis an extension, re-sign Kuz, and then you got Beal on a big deal. I don't understand what they're doing. You have all your money tied up into these 3 players, which they all are B and C level players as far as like stars go. So I don't really quite understand. And I saw something about Bradley Beal. One of the I don't know if it's the owner or one of the GM. Somebody said out of their organization said they don't think that Bradley Beal has hit his prime yet. I don't know what prime is if Bradley Beal has not hit his prime yet. Let me see something then. Wizards, hey, best of luck to you guys. You guys have been a fun league pass team for me to watch because I mean, watching Porzingis and Beal, they're fun to watch, and watching Kuzma go off is fun to watch. However, in the Eastern Conference, that team is not going to cut it.
Yeah, I think the Wizards are one of those teams that, like, unless they make major moves, they're going to be back in the situation next year where they're like the last eulogy that we read off because they stuck around right until the end, but ultimately they just weren't good enough. Hopefully they make some moves to change that, but I expect to be reading their name before the playoffs again next year as well. Last one. Thank you all for your patience tonight. The Orlando Magic started their season October 19th, 2022, and they were eliminated from playoff contention on April 4th, 2023. This team was never expected to be a contender this year, but they fought till the end, and they showed to have one of the best young cores in the entire NBA. Paolo Banchero had a tremendous rookie season, and guys like Franz Wagner took another leap and looked to be promising young guys to build out around as well. Even Markelle Fultz appears to have found a home, as he was another bright spot for this young squad. The only pitfall of their season was another major injury to Jonathan Isaac, who has spent more time on Fox News than on an actual NBA court over the last 3 seasons. But we pray that he is able to fully recover and get back to fulfilling his potential. We'll now fully put the Orlando Magic to rest. Before we do, anything you'd like to say on them, Zach?
I have nothing to say about the Magic. Good young team. Isaac, things are gonna be okay, man. For
If
your
not,
sake,
you got the book deal. You'll be okay.
yeah.
You
For
can
your
keep writing
sake,
some books.
I hope your president don't get arrested for you. But anyways, Chance, man, let's hop up out of here, man. Hey, until
Yeah,
next
we're
time,
getting in
guys,
trouble.
we'll holler at you. Peace.